Welcome to episode 1 of my garage makeover. We recently moved into a 1970s house and the garage is looking pretty rough and really in need of some love. I spent a ton of time in here, so I decided to do an epoxy floor to help me keep it clean a lot easier and to make it look nicer. Hands down, the hardest part of doing an epoxy floor is the prep work. It requires that your garage floor is perfectly, completely clean before you get started. So the cleaning and the prep work actually takes a lot longer than the painting itself. I started by sweeping out all of the dust, and I even busted out a vacuum to help me get it clean, and I'm pretty sure my neighbor saw I had lost my ever-loving mind at this point. Once you've done your initial clean, it's time to get in there with a concrete cleaner and degreaser. Scrub the floors and rinse it off, and then you're ready for the muriatic acid. This is a product that should come with your garage floor epoxy kit, and it's really easy to use, but be sure that you're using gloves and protective gear. Pour or spray it on the floor and then use a scrub brush to get it really in there and let it work and completely clean your flooring. Both of these steps can be really exhausting on your arms and require a lot of scrubbing, but I promise that it's really worth the effort. Having a clean garage is the key to making sure that this product is going to stick properly and last you for decades. So you're going to scrub and scrub and scrub. And I'm leaving a lot of this footage in here because I really want to emphasize how important the cleaning and the scrubbing and the cleaning really is in making sure that this product works. It even makes a super satisfying fizzing sound. Once your garage floor is done fizzing and you're done scrubbing, it is time to rinse it off. Make sure that you get all of that acid off of there because you don't want to leave any behind. Rinse it really, really thoroughly, and then you're going to let it dry for at least 24 to 36 hours before you move on to the next step. Your garage floor might look dry before it is actually dry. Next, you're going to repair any cracks in the floor. I'll link the product that I used below, but I wasn't as happy with it as I have been with other products that I've used in the past, so I'll link those too. This is an annoying step after all of that cleaning, but I promise it's worth it because if you leave cracks in your floor, it can make the epoxy not seal as well, fail over time, and just generally not last as long. Once that's dry, you are finally ready to start. I went with Rust-Oleum's Epoxy Shield product for this project. I've used both of their Rock Solid and their Epoxy Shield before, and I find the Epoxy Shield is a lot easier to work with. I think that the Rock Solid has a really cool look, and this is a little more basic, but this is much simpler to work with. It's a lot less finicky, and it's way easier for beginners. You'll find that painting with this is really similar to painting with any regular paint. You're just going to use a paintbrush and a roller, and you're going to spread it on. Start in the very back of your garage with the hardest to reach spaces. As you can see, I had to work under a workbench for a little while, but knock those out first, and then once you get to the main part of the garage, it's going to be really easy and go much faster. Keep in mind that cleaning epoxy off of anything is just about impossible, so use a brush and a roller that you don't mind tossing when you're done, and probably wear clothes that you don't mind tossing when you're done if you're a messy painter. The basic steps to follow here are simple. Just start with your brush and cut in along the edges. Use tape if you feel like you need it, and then grab your roller and get to filling in. You'll notice that I'm working in small sections here. This stuff dries relatively fast, and you're going to want to add those flakes while it is still very wet. So they recommend that you don't work in a larger than a 4x4 square. In some of these harder to reach spaces, I worked in an even smaller area because when you're doing a lot of painting with the brush, it takes a little bit longer. So get your section painted and then grab your flakes and the fun part starts. The best way to evenly distribute the flakes around your paint is to just toss them in the air and let them land. It looks silly and it feels a little bit crazy, but it actually works really well. I always toss a few handfuls and then I go back and sprinkle some flakes over the areas where I feel like I didn't have quite enough. If you look at the edges of where I last painted, you'll see that the flakes don't go all the way to the edge. That's because I'm trying not to get them on the dried part of the floor. So you always want to overlap your sections just a little bit and keep a wet edge so that whenever you're done painting, it's not really obvious that you worked in sections because of how the flakes land. If your garage is set up like mine where you have a raised section at the back, that's going to be the hardest and most tedious part of the entire process. Once this part of the garage is done, the rest is going to go shockingly fast, except for those edges where you have to use the brush. But no matter how tedious that back section is, it's not nearly as bad as the cleaning part. So once you've got that done, it's pretty much all smooth sailing. The biggest things to keep in mind as you're working are: 1, always keep that wet edge. You want to work in sections and overlap them so that it doesn't look like a big grid whenever you're done. 2, remember that epoxy has a much shorter working time than paint does. You can't just walk away from this project and return to it a day or two later. But for the kit I use, the epoxy does come in 2 separate bags. So you can use one bag, and then if you're not done, come back and use the second one later. The kit says it's good for a 2.5 car garage. My garage is a little bit smaller than a regular 2-car garage, and I managed to get the whole thing done with just one bag. So I saved the second one for my husband's 1-car garage, which I'm really excited about. Number 3, be sure to pay attention to how many flakes you have left. The kit comes with 2 separate bags of flakes and is meant to be able to cover an entire 2.5-car garage, but I like a heavier look for my flakes, and so I used both bags in this slightly less than 2-car garage, and I don't have any left. You can buy extra flakes separately, and they're pretty cheap, so it's not a big deal. But as you're working, you really want to pay attention to how many flakes you have left, because it would be really annoying to run out of them in the middle of a bag of epoxy and have to run to the store and have the epoxy dry out on you. So just pay attention as you work, and maybe grab an extra bag of flakes before you start if you know you're going to be using a lot of them. And other than that, it's pretty much just like any other painting project. It's simple, it's quick. This entire thing, after I got it cleaned, took me about 2 hours to paint. This is a much faster job than the rock solid was, and that's one of the reasons that I really recommend it for beginners or people who don't work with epoxy a lot. Oh, one final tip, be sure that you're paying attention to your path as you're painting. The last thing you want is to accidentally paint yourself into a corner and be stuck. So just make sure that you're painting towards the big door of the garage and that you can reach all of the areas that you need to paint before you're done. This product takes about 12 hours before you can walk on it, and I believe it's 24 hours before you can drive on it. When you get back in there, you might notice some loose flakes. Don't worry about it. Those are just the ones that didn't stick into the epoxy, and it's totally normal to have some flake off. Just clean the floor and enjoy the finished product. If you'd like, you can seal it with a clear coat for an even more durable finish, but I left mine alone this time. Next on my list is finally taking care of those dingy, dirty walls. So stay tuned for part 2.